sound you hear is our subtle week-long tribute to the late, great, I can't believe those words just came out of my mouth, Neil Peart of Rush. I stated on Twitter and on social media, I'll say it again, as big a fan as Phil Collins that I am, and he is my favorite and always will be. As far as drummers go, there was Buddy Rich, and then there was Neil Peart. Then there was Jimmy Chamberlain, but that's another discussion for another time. Yes, the outro will also be more Rush and Neil Peart. But welcome to HIAC Talk Radio. Dan Calachico, Dan Law 83, Craig Lagans at Craig Lagans. It's real difficult to follow us on social media. You can never figure it out. HIAC Talk Radio. Well, it's the wrestling pod. I've renamed it. The HIAC Wrestling Podcast is on all social media platforms. HIAC Talk Radio. We're going to be talking about a new TNT and AEW deal. We're going to be talking about the unfortunate breaking news of the passing of Rocky Johnson. But Kelly just got back from the thrift store. And here's one I had this on VHS, just some DVDs, all related. I had this on VHS. I never had this on DVD. It's the Best of Raw Volume 1.
Wow.
Best of Raw Volume 1, so I'm pretty sure it doesn't go past 97. This was the re-release when it was still the Attitude Era, so it might be salvageable. This I also never had on DVD, but this is a VHS that I had, was the Best of WrestleMania right before the Attitude Era, WrestleMania 15, I guess. So I guess it's up to 14. This I never had DVD either. This one was always harder to find. ECW Bloodsport.
Wow. 19
of the most brutal matches in ECW history, and one I've never had, TNA's Bloodiest Brawls.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it ends with the barbed wire massacre at Turning Point. Monsters balls in here, both of them. Well, at the time.
Both balls.
That's what I'll be doing. Oh, no, I won't be doing that all weekend because Primetime Pro Wrestling is going to be at the Deanwood Recreational Center in Washington, D.C. Tickets are sold out. However, if you walk up and ask me and pay me for standing room only, I might let you in. I'm not pocketing that money because they'll kill me. It's going right back to the company. Originally, as I said it sounded like I was like, no. I mean, it's going to... Anyway, yeah. So I kind of wanted to bookmark this with the passing of a certified legend in wrestling. Of course, he would later be known as the father to some guy named Dwayne Johnson. Nobody important. Never meant anything in wrestling. But the Soul Man, Rocky Johnson, passed away today at the age of 75. When you think of the word milestones in professional wrestling, especially when it comes to African Americans, this guy was at the forefront of it back in the day. Craig.
Yeah. Rocky Johnson really, the footsteps he walked in were from guys like Bobo Brazil, from Ernie Ladd. Rocky Johnson was the first African American face that had a bit of flash to him. The Soul Man gimmick plays well in the 70s, obviously, era of soul. But Rocky, with his boxing background, stole the alley shuffle like every other athlete, African American did at the time. And he was a guy that had his own look, his own style. He was the first African American face that you could market. He wasn't a huge plotting guy, a giant guy like Bobo Brazil. He wasn't a huge, charismatic big man like Ernie Ladd. This was a clean-cut baby face with an amazing drop kick, an incredible body, like it was drawn by Marvel Comics, and just a good-natured being, and someone the fans could cheer, and it just happened to be black. And that epitomized Rocky Johnson everywhere he went, especially throughout the NWA. The territories. His first big break was on the West Coast in San Francisco in the Roy Shire area. He was United States champion and a United States tag team champion with Pat Patterson. Pat Patterson would stay in Rocky Johnson's life. It was Pat that convinced Rocky to come to the WWF in 1983, in his first big run on a national scale. But in Florida, he was Florida heavyweight champion. Texas, he and Bruiser Brody struck up a friendship that remained till Brody's untimely death. In Tennessee with Jerry Lawler, they had great matches there. There was one of the boxing matches that they had where Lawler was getting his butt kicked because of Rocky's and Jerry Lawler sold like like any of Tyson's opponents, just constantly flopping until Lawler took a water. He didn't spit it out, and he spit it in Rock's face, and then he used a foreign object in his boxing glove and beat Rocky bloody. But the programs that they had in Memphis were just incredible. But all thanks to Rocky Johnson. His NWA title matches against Harley Race, against Dory Funk, and the Intercontinental title matches he had with Don Morocco. I really don't know why he never got a run with the belt. Yeah. At the Intercontinental belt.
As far as the NWA title, was that just wrong place, wrong time because who was champion at the time?
Yeah, with Harley, he was, and Terry Funk. I apologize. Terry Funk. He had pinned Terry Funk in a non-title match in Texas. It was a great angle, which they don't do any more of.
Yeah.
Terry Funk had always tried to avoid Rocky Johnson. It's in Texas. This is in the Paul Bosch territory. And he finally got a 1 hour match with Rocky, a 2 out of 3 fall 1 hour match, but he picked his own timekeeper. And it wasn't a guy, it wasn't he was just, I want this guy to be my timekeeper. Rocky won the first fall, Terry Funk won the second fall, and Terry Funk flat on his back, Rocky pinned him, and then the bell rang, and saying it was a 10-minute, the hour time limit was up. But the match had only gone 48 minutes.
Oh.
And you didn't find out till the next week that it was Funk's hand-picked man who called the match early, and that Rocky Johnson should have been NWA champion. But those types of close calls is what kept Rocky Johnson a perennial contender in the NWA territories. Wherever he went, he was always the top guy, or at least the top babyface. He even put on a mask in the Mid-Atlantic area as Sweet Ebony Diamond, and wrestled alongside Ricky Steamboat, his future tag team championship partner Tony Atlas, who's Iron Sheik, who was Hussein Arab back then. So yeah, Rocky, and I guess the biggest claim to fame would be that when he and Tony Atlas became the first African American Black World Tag Team Champions in when they beat the Samoans, and still on the DVD, the wildest WWF matches ever. Captain Lou Albano came in the ring while the referee's back was turned and went to hit Rocky over the head with a chair, and Rocky ducked, and the chair went through the head up off of the Samoan, and Rocky Johnson pinned him with the chair still around off his neck. And they became the first Black Tag Team Champions of the world. They didn't hold the belts that long because, unfortunately, Rocky and Tony Atlas didn't really get along. And they only had one TV title match, I believe, TV title defense, and they would lose it later on to Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch. But that title losing match wasn't shown for a month after they lost it to keep them as WWF Tag Team Champions. But yeah, that was his big claim, his big national claim to fame. Even though he pinned the Magnificent Morocco on a non-title TV bout, he was never given an Intercontinental title run, which always surprised me. But maybe because of Rock's nature of always traveling around, he had a family to take care of, one that was in Allentown. Probably that's why he never moved on after the WWF. And he was married to the daughter of High Chief Peter Maivia, Lita Maivia. His father-in-law, Peter Maivia, one of the great bookers in the Hawaii territory and one of the great minds in wrestling. So he married into a wrestling family, and he married Peter Maivia's daughter and gave birth to a young man, and he named him Dwayne. And I don't know what became of him, but wherever he is, I'm sure he has to be proud of his father for what he's done in professional wrestling and just what he's done as a dad. So many wrestlers get into the business to get close to their fathers because they didn't have any time with their fathers. And obviously, being the son of Rocky Johnson opens some doors, but being the son of any famous athlete or person can open the door. But what you do once you get inside the door is all completely up to you. And who would know that a guy who named himself Flex Cavana, so as not to capitalize on the last name of Johnson, would go on to do so many great things. Rocky Johnson was voted into the Hall of Fame, deservedly so. Should have been a lot sooner than he was, but he was, and it's really sad that we have to say goodbye to him at the age of 75, considering the amount of the great shape he was always in. Just sad to. I'm going to miss him.
Yeah, and I was going to read off his accomplishment. I just want to explain. I was not laughing at anything you were talking about, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
DDP is wrestling on AEW Dynamite.
Yeah.
That was called an AEW Nitro.
Mm-hmm.
And MJF came out with a T-shirt saying, "I banged Dallas's daughter."
Oh, wow. That's a great shirt.
And I was trying not to laugh. But at the same time, so I held my cool there. I didn't laugh. But at the same time, Kelly walked in, and I pointed. I said, "Look, it's DDP, which under Sting is God to me." And she just looked at me and was like, "Really?" I said, "Well, I didn't write this. I didn't. DDP yoga. What? You'll be fine." But I did want to go over his accomplishments.
Yes.
WWF Tag Team Champion. He was in the St. Louis Wrestling and WWE Hall of Fame in 2008. Pacific Northwest. He was the NWA Pacific Champion, Tag Team Champion, NWA Polynesian. I knew I was going to screw the word up, but I knew the word and I still did it. Pacific Tag Team Champion. NWA United States Heavyweight Championship, World Tag Team Championship. That was in San Francisco. Hollywood Heavyweight Champion, Tag Team Champion, Television Champion, Continental International Tag Team Champion, Southern Heavyweight Championship, Big Time Wrestling, Brass Knuckles Championship, Texas Heavyweight Championship, their Tag Team Champion, NWA All-Star, Canadian Tag Team Championship, the Mid-Atlantic Television Championship 2 times, Georgia Championship Wrestling, Georgia Heavyweight Tag Team, and the Macon Tag Team, Continental Wrestling Association, the Southern Tag Team Champion, Championship Wrestling from Florida, Brass Knuckles Champion, the Heavyweight Champion, the Tag Team Champion, and the Television Champion, and Big Time Wrestling, the World Tag Team Champion. Not bad from a guy from Canada, from Nova Scotia.
No,
That's the thing. That's the thing people don't realize. Dude was from Amherst, Nova Scotia. He was a Canadian. Just a little Canadian guy who not only broke down barriers, built on the barriers that were broken before him, and also created some guy called The Rock. So it literally every facet of the word, the man is legendary. You can't get any more legendary than that. And I think should be on anybody's list, along with Piper and several others, of never being the NWA or World Heavyweight Champion for the WWF. That's just my opinion. And I only knew him. You watched him. I only knew him from obviously archival footage and stories I've heard. But I don't think I'm out of line saying that.
Oh no, not at all. Because of his work ethic and because of the way he connected to so many to fans, and again, he had everything. He was a total package before there was a total package, because not only did he look great and have a good promo and connect with the fans, the moves he had, the athleticism, were just no one really was his equal in that during that period of time. And like I said, every territory he went, he was the guy on top, if not the top baby face.
Yeah.
He was the top man, and his I guess his demeanor. He was just a good guy. I didn't want to because there was a couple stories, but I got them from Rock's book about his dad, and what a great guy he was.
Read that book.
Yeah, and even when The Rock played him on an episode of that '70s show, he got to play his own dad.
I did not know that. I never saw that.
In that '70s show, they were going to the wrestling matches in the American Dairyland to see Rocky Johnson, managed by Ernie Ladd. Ernie Ladd, who played himself. And here you have The Rock, dressed up like his dad, had the fro and had the mustache. And he said, I want to be a great wrestler, but if not, I want my son to be the most electrifying man in professional wrestling. And gave the people's eyebrow. And this is when Topher and Ashton Kutcher were in the scene. They went to the locker room to talk to Rocky Johnson, who was their favorite wrestler. And
I never knew that. I never saw that episode.
That was Rock's, when this is 99, 2000. When
about right, yeah.
Yeah. But I can't say enough good things about it. It was a great picture in Rock's book of him as a kid in the den with his dad, surrounded by all of his dad's belts, and it was just a great. And the belts were bigger than his head, than Rock's head. He was just sitting there, but like he's surrounded by all these belts, and that his dad had, and it was just a really. And a picture of Baby Rock being held by Andre the Giant. We've seen that time and time again.
Yeah.
I was at the Spectrum, and I think little Dwayne was there too. For Rocky Johnson's last match in Philadelphia ever. And it wasn't really a match. It was against Jesse the Body Ventura in his last match ever at the Spectrum. They were going to, before we get into it, Jesse said he challenged Rocky Johnson to a pose down. And Jesse did his thing. And then while Rocky Johnson was doing his thing, doing posing, the crowd was going nuts. And while the reason why they were going nuts was because, unbeknownst to Rocky Johnson, Jesse Ventura was very slowly making his way toward the top rope. And he eventually came off and nailed Rocky Johnson from behind, knocking him out of the ring, injuring his shoulder. The referee called the match. It never started, and it was over.
That son of a bitch.
Yes, that future governor of Minnesota. So neither one of them wrestled. Jesse, I believe, was on his way out. That would be one of his last appearances ever. He retired that year, and that was the last match of time I saw Rocky Johnson in the ring in Philadelphia, and the last time Jesse Ventura had ever wrestled or ever appeared in the Philadelphia Spectrum. And the Philadelphia 76ers beat the Brooklyn Nets, more importantly than all of that.
That's why I was looking down at my phone at the same time. I'm like, what's the final score? The Flyers tied it up, so...
yes. All is right with the world. Yeah, well, not all right with the world, but because we lost a great man, a great athlete, a great professional wrestler, and a great man. They're going to go back to the Tony Atlas, Rocky Johnson being the first black tag team champions. I'm sorry we couldn't go more with that. I don't know what the deal is between those two, why they didn't get along. Rocky, I've never heard one person say anything bad about Rocky Johnson. I heard plenty of people say bad things about Tony Atlas.
I was about to add on to that. Guy's kind of a.
I'm not pointing fingers, but it's a shame that they couldn't get they couldn't get along, as Dr. King eloquently put it. But
I'll point fingers.
But his legacy, even if that's the only thing he did, just absolutely staggering the amount of accomplishments he's had. I don't think he would have. He should have been NWA champion. Not that he could. No, but I said the same thing about Ernie Ladd. Because of I couldn't see him wrestling in different opponents 7 nights a week and in different territories. I couldn't see him being a heel. Like Ernie before him, whereas Ernie would be the top heel in 3 different federations at 3 different territories at the same time. Rocky would stay in one spot for 3 months at a time, 3 months at a time somewhere else, and 3 months at a time somewhere else. Ernie would be in 3 different territories in 1 week. That's why I didn't see them lending themselves to be an NWA champion. Rocky liked to be the top face in one territory at a time. He couldn't do that as NWA champion. Not that he couldn't, and not that his mic work. While he's no Ernie Ladd, he wasn't a guy that would get. You came to see Rocky Johnson to see what he can do in the ring. He didn't have to talk you into the. He didn't have to talk you into the arena. You wanted to see the Soul Man. You wanted to see those mind-numbing drop kicks. You want to see the alley shuffle. You want to see him beat somebody to the way he. A clip of him beating Terry Funk down to the canvas just with lefts. He hit Terry Funk with left, and with each left, Terry Funk would go down to 1 knee, 2 knees, down to his knees, and finally the right put him flat on his face. But just the rapid fire, the way he would hit, and Jerry Lawler, the way that Jerry Lawler saw Rocky Johnson's punches. Again, the boxing match were just, but that's the love and the respect they had for Rocky Johnson. His footprint on this on professional wrestling is unparalleled, not just for a wrestler, but for an African American wrestler. You said it very eloquently. The barriers he put down and the barriers that other people broke down, he set new ones, broke them all for future generations, and he gave us The Rock.
Sometimes I know what I'm talking about. Sometimes. I can't wait for you to. First of all, thoughts and positive vibes to The Rock and the rest of the Johnson family, all sides. Literal passing of another legend of wrestling. Period. End of story. End of discussion on that. Gonna do a little network search on Rocky Johnson tonight because that'll be fun. I know I know a good amount of stuff's probably got to be on there. Transition into discussing AEW, and then we'll close the show out with the wrestling historian. Not only is DDP wrestling tonight, are you watching it?
No. I want you to weave me a yarn.
DDP just did a flying crossbody off the top rope to the outside.
Why?
Onto everybody in the match.
Oh, I was gonna say it had to be at least 8 people catching him, right?
It was 5.
Okay.
It was 5, to be fair.
They needed more guys.
To be fair. Number 1, I have 2 more updates. Number 2, I truly hope he hasn't really aged.
No.
I know as far as he ain't having matches like he used to, even in the WWE because his back and neck are so screwed up. But the DDP, you could talk all you want about him being a shill. That's real. That's for real. He doesn't look like, body wise, he doesn't look like he's aged. No. And he was, in wrestling terms, an old man when he started.
Yes.
Number 3, tie-dye guy's still alive.
Wow.
he's at ringside. Hey, tie-dye guy. We always play that game when we watch old Nitros and Raw. We're like, where is he? There he is. Hey, guess what? That dude hasn't looked like he's aged either, and he's in the Florida sun a lot. So he's in the Florida sun a lot. He still looks the same. Hulk Hogan looks like a broken leather bag. So you tell me.
Well, he looks like a catcher's mitt with blonde streaks. Yes.
The blonde streaks are the broken ties that are on the
on the back of the catcher's mitt. Yeah.
So AEW, within 1 year of airing on TNT, has signed a 3-year extension, 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, the numbers are such across. I don't talk about television ratings because you and I have discussed the ratings in general for wrestling being lower and the back and forth. Say what we want, we could argue and debate the shows being good or not. It's been a lull recently.
Mm-hmm.
This episode's been great. I can't wait to watch NXT because last show I watched live was fantastic.
Yeah.
But I said that I'm going to make an effort to watch as much so I can talk about it fairly. Because end of the year, I was like, I can't. I just can't. I got to take a break. This episode's been solid. As far as DDP, I did want to add, before I forget, that I liked the way they used him. People complain about WWE and only sticking old guys, quote unquote, into spots, in main event spots and pay-per-view spots. This was on a random AEW Dynamite.
Mm-hmm.
It was a special event because it's the Bash of the Beach evening. But it wasn't on pay-per-view. It wasn't a blow-off to a feud. It was a tag team match on a Wednesday night show. That I have no complaints about that. That was great, and they used him sparingly because it's freaking Diamond Dallas Page.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2. Number 3. Again, as much as I think I just made up numbers. I think I was past them. Again, we talk about ratings being down. It's to a point where the numbers, the imprint they have on orders on the Fight TV app or the Bleacher Report app, excuse me, hundreds of thousands of buys for those shows. Reach on social media is to a point where TNT looked at it and said, we're going to stick with you long term. 2023, not only are we adding Dynamite for 3 years, we're adding a second show on television. Not a YouTube show. There's going to be a second show of AEW on TV. Now, after we talked about all this too much wrestling thing, AEW has the same problem WCW did in 1999. They have a roster full of people and not enough television time to... They're not spreading it out.
No.
This extra hour or two, that I'm actually looking forward to because there's a couple people that have been signed there that have been given the shaft that I'd really like to see if they can do anything with. This is put up or shut up right now. You have the roster. You have extra time. Not dark. That doesn't count. It's fun to watch because it's just wrestling. There's less crap on that. There's less filler. It's an hour. Maybe it's an hour or two. It's about an hour over on YouTube. Put on the background. Just watch good wrestling. This is good.
Yeah.
This is the stuff I like. I might not be able to participate in watching all of it, but the fact that those numbers are up against the news that Raw went another record low in their ratings, WWE is not showing enough desperations outside of NXT. NXT has been booked solid. Fantastic. No complaints. Before and even since AEW went on the air, in my opinion. AEW's been hot or cold, but they're also brand new, and there's a lot like... And I fall into the trap where they're like, well, they're doing this, they're not wowing me. They've been on less than a year. Calm down. You got to calm down, and you got to give them time. I use the Tonight Show Conan O'Brien analogy. 7 months is not friggin' long enough. Go kiss my hat. October's not long enough. Calm the L down. Oops. Almost cussed there. Nope. Well, saved it. Raw and SmackDown, on the other hand, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to say this. I care less and less if they figure it out.
Okay.
Got Royal Rumble coming up, and their shows leading up to it have been AJ Styles, Buddy Murphy, Aleister Black on Raw have been highlights. Becky Lynch and Asuka this week were fantastic. SmackDown, Kevin Owens. SmackDown I haven't caught in 3 weeks just because I've been busy professionally and personally. I just haven't been able to catch up.
Well, the return of John Morrison was...
Oh, God, that's right. See, I watched that, and it's weird. I watched it. I was like, I'm going to watch it without doing anything else. And the crowd took me out of it. And I'm not blaming the crowd. Like, how dare they? It's been meh, so they're reacting meh. So I was all hyped for this. Like, oh, John Morrison and The Miz. And people were like... I'm like... I hear you. I don't care either. I want to care. Those two could be a boom for that company. So we'll see. Again, it just started happening. But overall, that's good news. In a world where everybody is right and has an opinion about wrestling, the fact that the numbers were good enough for TNT to go, considering the BS they went through with WCW years ago.
Yeah.
They saw the couple months and were like, yeah, sure, let's do it. That's a good sign, Craig.
Yeah, well, them getting a 3-year extension is a good sign. They obviously believe in the product. And like you said, I wish that they can do more with the talent roster they have. I'm still tired of seeing the same people get the same spots when you have a talent roster that deep. And I've made my feelings known about MJF not getting anywhere near enough time or spots or matches to show when he's the best heel in the company. He's the best heel on either company, on either show. But Nyla Rose is another one, or Kong, or any of the women's division.
I don't even talk about Nyla Rose. That pisses me off so much. I don't even.
Or any other talent there. I wouldn't say wasting, but the amount of time they get is criminal compared to how much time they waste on, not waste, but they put on other people.
Hold that thought. Viral in the Twitch chat. Yes, of course, I love you. Go ahead. Continue.
Yeah, we love you. It's a collective love.
Yes, we love you.
Yeah. But I hope they utilize the time that they do have better. And now that they have a 3-year extension, not that they were operating with a sense of urgency, like, oh my God, we're going to be canceling any minute. But now that they have a cushion and a safety net of sorts, hopefully they can utilize what they have and put on a better quality program. Again, because the women's division sucks there, and they just need to do a better job of to borrow an Andy Reid, Brett Brown to put guys in better situations to make plays.
Yeah, it could be worse, but it could be a lot better considering. But the show this week's been great. It's been better than Raw just thus far, and we're almost at the finish at the end. So, just saying.
Yeah, I'm just saying it too. And now, Dan, with your kind permission, I'd like to take you back. I'd like to take you and the rest of our HIAC Talk Radio fans by the hand and guide you back to a time when territories ruled the landscape of professional wrestling, when titles were called belts, and when sports entertainment was indeed professional wrestling. We're going to go back to January 11th, 1991. Very snowy day out, because I remember how bad the snow was, not just here, but in most of the East Coast. And a big card in WCW was sold very well, but very few people showed up at the Brendan Byrne Meadowlands Arena in Jersey. Only 5,000 fans showed up, but they were projecting maybe close between 10 and 12,000. For one of the special attractions was a match between United States champion Lex Luger with Lawrence Taylor in his corner, going against the big cat Curtis Hughes and his manager Paul E. Dangerously. And Lex Luger, with the help of LT, won that match and retained his United States championship. The main event that night, though, was Ric Flair defeating the NWA heavyweight champion Sting to become the first WCW heavyweight champion. And Flair would hold that belt until the summer, until July 1st, when he was fired on that date. But it was Ric Flair ending Sting's first world title reign at the Brendan Byrne, the Meadowlands Arena. It was funny because that night they showed a clip of the Horsemen celebrating, and Arn Anderson and Barry Windham had defeated the then WCW Tag Team Champions Doom in a non-title match, in a non-title cage match. So you saw Flair, Arn, Tully, and Barry Windham celebrating with Lawrence Taylor, who was a face, who was in the face's corner, but celebrating with Ric Flair and the Horsemen. And this is shown on WCW television.
Jersey doesn't deserve it.
Yes. But that happened January 11th, 1991, a very snowy East Coast snowstorm that day.
Son of a bitch.
The very next year, January 11th, 1992, I was in the snow, and I lived in upstate New York, in Rochester, New York, and because of that, I couldn't be at the Philadelphia Spectrum on this date to see a couple of dream matches in pairings that have never occurred before or since. It only happened in Philadelphia, at the Philadelphia Spectrum, when I wasn't there on January 11th, 1992.
Oh, dare they?
Bret Hart teamed up with the Road Warrior to defeat the team of the Mountie and the Natural Disasters. Up until this time, I always hoped that Bret Hart and the Road Warriors in the same ring at the same time would never happen, but it happened in my own hometown of Philly at the Spectrum. But the big thing, the main event that night, was the Ultimate Fantasy match that I and scores, hundreds of thousands of wrestling fans always wanted to see, and it happened. And the only time it's ever happened in the Spectrum in Philadelphia, Hulk Hogan defeated Ric Flair by countout. This is back when Hogan and Flair had just gotten to the WWF, and they were doing a series of house shows around the country, dream matches, non-finishes, but Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair at the Spectrum would have drove the 10 hours from Rochester, where I was, to Philly to see this match, but alas, I didn't. But the first Hulk Hogan Ric Flair match ever in Philadelphia took place January 11th, 1992. The very next year, Dan, January 11th, 1993, was a landmark date in the history of professional wrestling because, like the DVD you showed me earlier, on January 11th, 1993, in the Manhattan Center in New York City, was the very first episode of Raw.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Wow.
The premiere of Monday Night Raw with your host, Vince McMahon, Randy Savage, and the sidekick of Don Imus, Rob Bartlett.
Ooh.
Also outside, your roving reporter, Sean Mooney, who made sure to enforce the ban that Bobby Heenan could not attend the first taping of Monday Night Raw, even stopping a woman. It turned out to be Bobby Heenan in drag, trying to get in to see the first episode of Monday Night Raw.
It turned out to be.
But wait a minute, Bobby Heenan. The first episode.
How long did he last on Raw? Real quick, before he left.
It was a year.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Anyway, sorry.
The first episode taped for Raw. Late great Yokozuna defeated Koko Beware. Other matches were Intercontinental Champion Shawn Michaels defeating Max Moon, and The Undertaker pinning Damien Demento.
Oh, wow.
Probably more significant was the dark match, Dan, that took place at the very first Monday Night Raw. In the dark match, to just try out the ring, to set up the lights, the Cheetah Kid defeated Johnny Rotten. The Cheetah Kid, who we now know would go on to be Ted Petty, and Johnny Rotten would change his last name from Rotten to Grunge. And Ted Petty and Johnny Grunge would go on. Ted Petty would change his name to Rocco Rock. Johnny Rotten would change his name to Johnny Grunge. And those two would go on to be the most popular tag team in the history of ECW. So 2 years after they wrestled each other in the very first Monday Night Raw, Cheetah Kid and Johnny Rotten would transform into Flyboy Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge, the Public Enemy.
Wow.
January 13th, 2001. I mentioned ECW, right? Well, in January 13th, 2001 would be the last event in the history of ECW. Before declaring bankruptcy on April 4th, they would hold their last event, of all places, in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, at the Pine Bluff Convention Center.
Okay, sure.
Some of the matches there, the ECW World and Television Champion, Rhino, would defeat Spike Dudley with a pile driver on the chair. Justin Credible and Sandman would have 2 matches, because Justin Credible wanted to wrestle Sandman in a clean match, and he defeated the Sandman. And then Sandman wanted to wrestle Justin Credible in his match, which would be a hardcore match. And Sandman ended up being Justin Credible after tombstoning him on the back of an air conditioner, on top of an air conditioner. And after the match, they would both hug in the ring. Tommy Dreamer came out with the entire ECW locker room to say goodbye to everyone through tears, and Sandman had the last beer.
This is where I get confused, and please continue after you answer the question. Is this the speech, the promo where Tommy cuts in the ring, where he says something to the effect of, no matter what happens to us, there's more hardcore mother effers here tonight than there is at WCW Nitro, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I can never place what show that's at, if it was at the second to last. I can never, and I can't find that footage, and I would really like to find it, because I remember watching that at night going, ooh.
But that would be the last ECW event before declaring bankruptcy. And as odd as it will be that the last one would be, and of all places, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. This was a indie federation that started at Swanson and Rittner in a place that had to be vacated by 11 o'clock, because that's when bingo would start. So to go from that to a national scale, to a TV deal, to video games, to dolls, to merchandising out the yin yang, to go national. The fact that there was an ECW match in Arkansas at all, to have an ECW match outside of Philadelphia, was considered huge. So from 94 to 2001, and you have it up there, the ECW DVD is a remarkable accomplishment. You know, we talk about AEW early on, about them signing a 3-year deal, and how too much wrestling on TV. And Paul Heyman was the first to say the reason why there's no ECW is because we didn't have a TV deal. If we had a TV deal, I would still be there. It would still be around. But the last one.
Go ahead. No.
The last event in ECW history took place January 13th, 2001.
It's interesting when you watch and it's a great DVD, and I know it's one of those that's got the. Good night, Viral. Thanks for listening, man. I'll talk to you later on Twitter.
Thank you, Viral.
He's a good guy. Follow his Twitch channel, and he's always tweeting about the Sixers and the Eagles, and always going to Eagles games. Good guy. I like that guy very much. One of the things that strike me is one of the best DVDs they ever put out was The Rise and Fall of ECW, and one of the things that always strikes me is when the thing with TNN was that problem started, and he goes, "We're dead. That's it. We're dead." And I just not retrospectively for him, but I'm sure he knew at that point that was it. It's over at that point. Mm-hmm. And, we talk about the underhanded tactics to survive as a wrestling company. And I'm talking about WWE here. And that's one of those things where they made it impossible for ECW to go anywhere else. Yeah. TT was still dealing with the end of Nitro at that point. USA was not going to take ECW after the debacle of how that ended originally with the WWE. They basically pushed him off TNN.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, with syndication, ECW is just a wrestling show bleeding money.
Yeah.
And it's depressing because, ECW, there's these, it's what I call fake woke Twitter. There's a lot of people who just are like, ECW was all crap and it's Philly crap and everybody in Philly sucks and blah, 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 blah. You see it. That's not ECW. Yes, they did have the boobs. They had the TNA. They had the blood. They had the hardcore stuff. They had the loud, rowdy, sweaty bastards. And I was part of it every now and then at the ECW at Viking Hall, ECW Arena, it's now called, or now known as. It's 2300 Arena, but nobody calls it that. The talent roster of literal Hall of Famers, legends, and greats in professional wrestling all went there, stayed there, or made their name there. And I'm talking about, just to name a few, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Rey Mysterio. I lost my train of thought there. Cactus Jack. And some guy called Steve Austin. I don't know. Never made really. He was okay. He never really made a name for himself. He's not that important to use an example for ECW. So it wasn't just a hodgepodge of BS, as people are like fake remembering, like it wasn't all that good. No, that's absolute BS. There was amazing matches. And, when I was younger, I loved the hardcore stuff and the boobs. I was a male that liked seeing boob every now and then, still do. But it's of its time. Let's not debate that. That kind of thing is of its time. But as far as wrestling, sometimes it was second to none during the quote unquote Monday Night War. But anyway, go ahead, sir. The floor is yours.
And not only for the great wrestlers that came out, the great spots and the great angles that have been copied in every federation after that. Stone Cold Steve Austin wasn't the first guy to have a beer in the ring. There was no canes under the ring in WWF before ECW. There were no triple threat matches in the WWE or WCW before ECW. Falls Count Anywhere matches, that was a Public Enemy match. The amount of not just the wrestlers, but the angles, the spots, the character developments, it wouldn't be if not for ECW. It was a revolution, and it was a game changer. It was the most innovative territory in professional wrestling. I would only put Smoky Mountain in there too, for the amount of Hall of Famers that they've also produced and the amount of great angles they also produced. But that's only because it's a credit to two of the greatest minds in professional wrestling that just happen to be two of the greatest managers in professional wrestling. That would be Paul Heyman and Jim Cornette. And what Paul was doing in ECW, Jim was doing in Smoky Mountain at the same time, but they were setting up the next generation of professional wrestling. But ECW played a big part in that, and that's absolutely undeniable. And you can also name a tag team that went on to be the most decorated tag team of all time, the Dudley Boys, that are synonymous with tag team wrestling. And where did they start? Where were they even a team? And they weren't even the original Dudleys. They were like the 8th or 9th Dudleys in the Dudley food chain. And look where they are now, in the Hall of Fame. Go figure. Yeah. Moving on. Speaking of this next date in history, January 14th. We're talking about we pay tribute to the great Rocky Johnson, and we talk about African American wrestlers and the barriers that they had to go through. Well, on this particular date, January 14th, 1960, it wasn't a wrestling match that caused a a change in segregation and in civil rights, and it changed in black wrestling. On January 14th, 1960, the most popular wrestler in Tennessee, maybe in the South, Sputnik Monroe, was arrested on Beale Street for being in a Negro bar. Now, Beale Street was all black, and the city of Memphis, as great as it was significantly segregated. Sputnik Monroe was the most popular wrestler in Memphis, maybe in the South, and he would frequent, and he had a lot of fans in the black community, who sadly weren't, if they weren't banned from the matches, would had to sit upstairs in what was called the crow's nest. Even though they were paying customers, they were sat far away from the action itself. Well, Sputnik Monroe was just a man who loved his fans, and he was arrested for being in a Negro bar. Now, keep in mind, he wasn't sitting in a Negro bar. He was just standing in the bar.
Yeah.
And he was arrested for the crime of public mopery, which in the statute was being frequented in an establishment where he shouldn't have been. Now, keep in mind, people of color were beaten, lynched, shot at for being in an all-white bar, but a white man in an all-black bar was arrested for mopery.
That still happens to this day. I just think white people have the dumbest language. Yes, he's arrested for mopery. That's the dumbest word I've ever heard used for soliciting.
Now, this made the papers. This was news that Sputnik Monroe was arrested in a Negro bar, and he went to court, and he was defended by an African American lawyer named with the last name of Sugarbottom. Well, if you listen to Jim Cornette, that guy's story deserves its own movie, not just Sputnik Monroe. But because this made news in Memphis and throughout the state of Tennessee, and Sputnik Monroe was the main event wrestler there. When his next match is there at the Louisville Gardens and in the Mid-South Coliseum, he made sure that African American fans got to sit not in the crow's nest, but on the floor or wherever they chose. The popularity of Sputnik Monroe, he got to dictate. Because it was always said that he didn't see color, he just saw green. Sputnik Monroe wasn't out to make a buck. He was out to make sure as many people got to see wrestling as they could. And if he had more black fans than white fans, why shouldn't they be allowed to come in to see their favorite wrestler?
Right.
Sputnik Monroe was a groundbreaker in terms of segregation and desegregation and for wrestling in the South. So when Rocky Johnson did wrestle in Memphis, his fans wouldn't have to have the same, wouldn't be blocked from seeing him, thanks to Sputnik Monroe. And Sputnik Monroe's arrest on January 14th, 1960, in a Negro bar in Beale Street made that possible.
It's so stupid. It's so stupid. It's so stupid that we're still. Never mind.
It was only 60. It was only 60 years ago, Dan.
Well, racism doesn't exist anymore. Get over it.
Yeah, I'll get over it.
Yeah, I see. You know, I've been friends with you for over 10 years, 10, 11, 12 years now. Had to count. Derek McDonald is another good friend of mine. We talk all the time about wrestling and other things when he needs to talk about it. And he goes deeper into the stories about his grandmother and what she had to deal with, and his grandfather, and his cousins, and his older cousins, and his great grandparents, and his parents. And I just say, if anybody who sits there on social media, if you want to sit there in your living room and say, well, racism doesn't matter anymore, get over it, that's fine. But if you want to be on social media and tell these people you should get over racism, just drown yourself. Stop it. Just stop. Just stop. No, I don't feel bad for saying that because it's terrible logic. Because it's the opposite of logic. It's illogical. It's stupid to say that. And stories like that literally happened. You could have been there.
Yeah.
You're that old.
Yeah.
You're that young. You know what I mean? That's
Yes.
just stupid logic to hear. Just hear. Anyway.
And the thing I say, Dan, I just passed on my way here. I passed the Starbucks where two African American men were arrested for waiting for their friend. And even though that's happened within the last year and a half, I still have it better than my parents.
Yeah.
And I still have it better than their parents.
And I just want to clarify, when you tell a story like that, I'm laughing at the stupidity of white people, not at what is happening. I'm laughing at the logic that got to that point where there's two black guys in here. I gotta call the cops.
Yeah. Well, so somebody saw a white guy in a Negro bar 60 years ago and said, I got to call the cops.
That's so stupid.
So the more things change.
Was it some schmuck outside going, hey, there's a white guy in that bar over there. You got to get him out of there. We can't sit with those people.
What it was, Dan, it was they recognized that it was Sputnik Monroe. That's how popular he was.
Okay, don't mess with Sputnik Monroe.
But they obviously something had to be wrong, because why would Sputnik Monroe, the most popular wrestler, be in this Negro bar?
Jesus Christ!
And the fact that it made the news, it was in the paper, and it went to court for all this had to happen for African American wrestling fans to not sit in a nosebleed section. It was called the Crow's Nest because of the amount of black people that were in there. It wasn't a spot because it was high up. So Sputnik Monroe made sure that didn't happen anymore. So we go from that date in history, as ugly as it was, to an even uglier incident that happened on that same date, January 14th, 2001. At the Conseco Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, Indiana, WCW had its first and last pay-per-view called Sin. The Sin pay-per-view, one and done. There were 3 title changes on this particular pay-per-view.
Certainly were.
And it will also happen to be the very last WCW match in the career of Bill Goldberg. He teamed up in a tag team match. Lex Luger and Buff Bagwell went up against Goldberg and Sergeant Buddy Parker. He was going by his real name of Dwayne Casey. Kid in the front row maced Goldberg. Goldberg did his best, and chair shot later, he was pinned, and that will be the last match in WCW history in the career of Goldberg.
The dumbest thing I remember watching.
Yeah. So from the dumbest thing I remember watching to the most gruesome thing I remember watching, it's that we were watching the Sixers game. We're both Sixers fans, and we still have the image of Joel Embiid's finger being bent. Well, that's nothing compared to what the 3 people who bought this pay-per-view saw when Sid Vicious decided to jump off the second turnbuckle and hit Scott Steiner with a super kick, landing on his leg, which promptly snapped in 2. January 14th, 2001, Sid Vicious became the Joe Theismann of professional wrestling when his leg snapped and the match had to continue. It turned out it was a 4-way match anyway. It was Sid Vicious, Scott Steiner, and Jeff Jarrett, and a mystery opponent. Do you remember the mystery opponent?
Yeah, it was Road Warrior Animal.
Yes. But all that
cared anyway.
Yeah, because all anyone cares about, all anyone remembers on that pay-per-view, the only pay-per-view in Sin would be the leg injury of Sid Vicious.
Now, here's the funny thing about that. Live on the pay-per-view, they don't show it. Because right before he jumps, which I'll get to in a second, being the WCW Mark nerd historian that I am, they cut to the mystery guy coming out.
Okay.
And I remember him pulling off the mask. People were like, hey, Animal's back. Somebody told Sid, whoever this was, and I remember seeing an interview later with Sid. He explained who it was, and I forgot now. But they should be just shot for this. So somebody told Sid, who was 6'10", 315 pounds at the time.
Yeah.
Which for 6'10", he's still in great shape, not fat at all.
Nope.
Told this guy, Sid Vicious, 6'10", 300 pounds, that he needs more aerial offense. So the idea was, okay, a one-legged big boot from the top, from the middle rope? Sure. All my weight landing on the other leg won't be a problem. It was, spoiler alert, it was a problem.
Yep.
And the funny thing about it, you mentioned the Joel Embiid injury. I could watch the Sid Vicious injury 100 times and make other people watch it go, oh, you can't watch it, can you? It doesn't bother me. I cannot watch the Joel Embiid finger thing.
Yeah. I can't watch it. You see, that's where Rob said, I can't watch the Sid thing. I can't.
Yeah, I understand.
Ever,
no, you and every other normal person, like, are you out of your mind? So anyway, he snaps his leg. He immediately goes like, you see me on video going,
hold it. Yeah.
They have to finish the run-in, which is the mystery opponent, which is Animal. So they start stomping him, and as they're stomping him, all you can see is the leg
just dangling. Yeah.
Do that from the middle of the calf down. Just. And amazing thing is he got surgery, got it repaired, and he was wrestling, a year later?
Yeah, I got to see him his ECW debut. I was there, so
well,
that wearing it.
That was before that. He debuted on. He wrestled. He wrestled in the area after that, but the next time I saw him was on World Wrestling All Stars. Remember that?
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. I saw him at a PWU show when he came out. Yeah. So that was in early 2000s when I saw him in that.
Ass.
Yeah. But he still had the knee pads on over the dungarees, so he was protecting those legs. Which brings us to today, Dan, January 15th. Some landmark dates. Born in 1987, a young lady who was one of my favorite divas, and she goes in the category of someone with a great given name that for some reason was given a wrestling name. But happy 33rd birthday to Kelly Kelly, who was born Barbie Blank.
Yeah, that's
not a great name? That's her given name, Barbie Blank.
That's amazing.
And like you couldn't have it as her name, but you could just have a Barbie and just have a dash after that. But yeah, so Barbie Blank became Kelly Kelly.
There's a great wrestler on the indie scene right now who wrestles for Chikara, and he wrestles for Primetime as well, but he wrestles a lot of places on the East Coast. He's just called Blank. And his name is just, as you said, the Blank.
Her given name is Barbie Blank.
That's amazing. You should go with that.
Yeah, and I will put that in the Bobo Brazil category, whose given name is Houston Harris, one of the great wrestling names of all time. But yeah, he was born Houston Harris, but for some reason was changed to Bobo Brazil. I don't know. I don't get it.
I'm speechless. I didn't know that.
Yeah, his given name was Houston Harris. Also today, in 1989, the very first WWF Royal Rumble pay-per-view. The Royal Rumble debuted a year earlier in 1988 on USA, It was only 20 men, won by Hacksaw Jim Duggan. This one, the first Royal Rumble pay-per-view, will be won by the late, great Big John Studd.
Hell yeah.
It would be one of Studd's last appearances in the WWF, and probably his biggest victory. Defeated Ted DiBiase, who entered at number 30, and John Studd would become one of the first people of the magic number 27, because more people have won the Royal Rumble at the number 27 than any number. And this is a great plug for the upcoming Royal Rumble this year. But the very first one occurred 31 years ago today, won by Big John Studd. And unfortunately, Dan, this day is a sad day in professional wrestling. I guess it just, how bad things come in threes. Well, on this particular day, not only did we have to say goodbye to the great Rocky Johnson. 3 years ago or 4 years ago, we had to say goodbye to one of his contemporaries, the controversial Superfly Jimmy Snuka. Left us on this date in 2016, and leaving us in 2014 was the eternally young but the eternally old Mae Young.
I knew you were going to say it. As soon as you said it.
Left us in 6 years ago, 2014, at the age of 90.
Man. So, Mark Henry tells my favorite story about Mae Young outside of the ring, where she's backstage. This is as they're, when they've known each other now, and it's during a Raw or SmackDown or whatever, and somebody says something, not off color, but somebody says something off-putting to Mae Young. And Mae Young goes, "Your fly's undone." And as the guy looks down to check it, she kicks him in the teeth.
Holy crap.
Takes a shot. The line, Mark Henry tells it much better, but she says, "You ought to show more respect to an older lady." That is not the line with something. The line she says to him after she kicks this dude in the face is, "You ought to show me more respect than that." It's like, damn.
Well, the Bubba Ray Dudley story he told her about power bombing her through a table.
You better power bomb me for real, boy.
Yeah, yes, he said, "Don't go easy on me now."
You go easy on me, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, Bubba said, "Yeah, he's still the toughest guy I know." But all interesting tidbit about Mae Young. She did start her wrestling career. Her first match was the day World War II started. So yeah, that says it all. It's history, and that, my friends, is the wrestling historian.
It would help if picked up the mic that was broken. It's been a real fun episode. I appreciate everybody listening on Twitch and the podcast later, watching it on video. I would appreciate if you just hit the share button. I'm not one to beg, but I'm not above it. If you know what I mean. But I think we should end it there on a low of a high note. But it was a funny story that came up from the death of Mae Young, who didn't die young, lived a full life. So really, it would be a high note. Craig, where can people follow you, and where do you want to spoil stuff on Facebook?
You can follow me, Dan, on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram at Craig Lagons, CraigLiggeons. If you're a fan of comic books and you're a fan of good music, my other podcast, Comic Book Gurus Podcast, we just recorded a special tribute to the late great Neil Peart and Rush. I had no idea that there was a graphic novel done by Rush. It was a graphic novel of the making of Farewell to Kings. And we talk about that and pay tribute to my favorite memories of Neil Peart and Rush. If it weren't for professional wrestling, I would not know anything about Rush. I only was aware of them when world class championship wrestling was syndicated in Philadelphia, and when finally got to see Divine Eric's wrestle in person. I mean, wrestle on television after reading about them in the After magazines. And Kerry Von Erich came to the ring to this kick-ass song that I never heard before in my life. This was 1984. It's like, man, that's a great tune. What is that? That tune would follow me throughout different phases of my life, and it would become my favorite song ever by Rush, mostly because of the drum solo in the middle. But if I ever was going to enter any arena or any place or anywhere, this would be my theme song. Thanks to Kerry Von Erich and thanks to professional wrestling, Tom Sawyer became my favorite song of the year, and still my favorite Rush song of all time. But if it wasn't for professional wrestling gave me my love of Rush. So it all ties into this podcast and to my other podcast. So thank you, Neil Peart. You're bringing two genres together, two great genres that taste great together, and I get to say thank you.
Oh yeah, that's a great story. And I either blocked it out, forgot, or had no idea that he ever came out to Tom Sawyer. So that's a great story. That little connection is great. Follow me on Twitter at DanLaw83. Follow the show and all of the shows on HIAC Talk Radio Network at HIAC Talk Radio on all social media platforms, part of the VOC Nation Radio Network, our temporary home away from home. If you want to listen on the web, thebradyhicks.com. Go to other shows, click on HIAC Talk Radio, or go to youtube.com/DanLaw83 to watch the video. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, go to Apple, iTunes, or Google Podcast, whatever the hell they're calling these things now. On your phone, type in VOC Nation Radio Network. For Craig Lagans, I am the above average comedian Dan Calchico. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.